Hello, hello, hello. It's another week. Nicholas Say, podcast, monologue. What's going on? Nicholas Say here, of course. It's my monologue. Had a great podcast yesterday with Lon. I just call her Lon. I can't pronounce the rest of her name, but she's great. A wonderful podcast with her. Might do another one with Jason Bonello this week. Could be good, could be great. Today, I've been thinking about it. Had a little bit of time to think. And I think today would be a good time to talk about fear and change. And instead of getting very esoteric, at least at first, I'm going to begin by talking about what I see going on in the European Union. Now, of course, the impetus for this is what's going on in Paris. Well, in France, really, it's all over France. These riots and political actions, and it's spread to Belgium and to some degree the Netherlands, to Holland, and they're wearing yellow vests. I think they're just called yellow vests, and they're extremely upset, and they are going to cause more trouble. They're already causing trouble, and they're going to cause more probably. And I think it's a lot of the time I find myself talking about connections, the idea of a super personal space that's very real. An idea that's larger than a single person or even a single group. And the European Union, to me, like anything, has both good aspects and aspects that really aren't positive for anyone and probably aren't going to be able to be sustained in the long run. Um, the banking system is obviously a big one. The banking system slash common currency slash budgetary demands on governments, especially in the South, that have radically different economies than a nation like Germany or the Netherlands or Finland or Belgium, whatever. Denmark. I don't know if Denmark's in there or not. Doesn't really matter. It's a teeny place. No offense if there's anyone from Denmark listening. No offense to the Danes. Danes are great. But this is happening at a time when you have you're just shy of a full fledged political revolution in Italy. Numerous groups, the Five Star Movement being the sort of the poster child of a pissed off Italian populace. Rising right wing politics in Germany. Angela Merkel just lost political control that she's held since 2005, I believe. I was there. Yeah, it was 2005. I was there when she was elected. That was kind of interesting. On that same trip, I'll tie it in with another personal memory. There were massive French riots in 2005. These are being compared to those. Um, Although I think that given the political and economic situation in Europe, I'm talking about France now, what could happen now is far, far, far more severe. The potentiality of this situation is extremely, extremely severe. For the simple reason that it's no longer the minorities that feel disenfranchised. 2005, the 2005 riots in France were all about disenfranchised North African and like basically just generally the disenfranchised minorities of France, who are given a meager existence at the expense of the state. Very little work, or if they do get work, it's odd jobs. There's okay, of course, there are a few that rise to prominence, but the system, much like it's stacked against some of the minorities in the United States, the system is stacked against them. To some degree, their own culture is stacked against them. Okay, but that's neither here nor there. Well, even if they were a contiguous unit, they would still face some pretty serious opposition in the political sphere. Anyway, So now pretty much everybody feels marginalized, and that's a direct result of the crisis in 2008, the financial crisis that happened a decade ago. It's pinned on Lehman Brothers, it's pinned on U.S. mortgage bonds, but I'll probably link to something from Peter Schiff of Euro Pacific Capital. I think that's his company. I'll probably link to that. He does a much better job, and probably will, it'd be a couple hours well spent if you're not familiar with the role that central banking has played in the creation not only of pretty much every crisis in my lifetime. I'm almost 40. Um, but even in a deeper sense, central banking has contributed to the modern political culture globally, and especially in the fiat currency era. I don't know that I would take the view of being wholly opposed to central banking as such, but there certainly have been numerous problems, um, especially since the dot-com collapse, that really question the legitimacy of the system, only in the sense that it no longer serves the function of creating human cohesion, which is my point about Paris and about Europe. The idea that, and many of these countries, Greece for example, and I think Spain also was involved in these, and perhaps other countries like Portugal and Italy, there was no way that they were going to meet, the governments were going to meet the fiscal demands of joining the European Union back around the millennium. And so what they did was, with the help of major Wall Street banks like Goldman Sachs, although I think others were involved as well, not to just take a big shot at Goldman, because a lot of people are doing that, but they were involved. Um, they basically created agreements that allowed these governments that could never uh, demonstrate the level of fiscal responsibility that was necessary to join. They allowed them to make their capital, their position, their financial position, look a lot better than it was. And of course, these were all time-based agreements, so it's not going to last forever. And the other thing that happened is that they expected these economies to be relatively stable, which, as we've seen, they aren't. They're not at all stable, and so you have a pretty terrible economic situation in many countries in Europe, um, and you have a central authority, Brussels, Frankfurt, to some extent the European Parliament. Most of them are on board. They really don't understand that the European Union will not last in its current form. Or if they do understand that, they are doing everything they can to delay it. I don't know. I don't know any of these people, and they're politicians, so even if they told me something, I wouldn't necessarily believe it, because they trade in lies and subterfuge, and who can believe these people? It's not hard to see that nations that are generally not tolerant of a heavy-handed government structure are starting to show signs of a major political fracture. That's what's happening in France right now. To some degree, that's what's happening in Italy. Um, you could also point to things like the Catalan secession movement, which was put down by force and created some very, very ugly media in in a political structure that it is supposed to be democratic. And so it seems as though the citizenry of Europe is being faced with a pretty awful choice. They can continue to allow the powers that be to run a political structure that is probably not going to last another decade, or they can take to the streets and go the revolutionary route. Now, who's to say where this will end this time in France? And I think there are many laws and regulations against inciting any kind of violence. And also at a personal level, I think it's always preferable to find a solution that doesn't involve what is essentially open domestic insurrection, because it's always ugly, no matter the end result. I mean, although that was how modern France was born, the reign of terror that followed the killing of whatever king that was. It was really, really ugly, and eventually it came to an end. But God, the body count, and this is where change comes in. The modern political class, more or less globally, but especially in the United States, the European Union, there is no real change that they are going to offer to their populace. They're not going to roll back regulations. Brussels isn't going to just throw their hands up and say, you know what? Let's engage in a series of referendums and we'll drastically reduce our role in the European Union and we'll change the nature of the euro. They can't do it. I mean, I don't think they really could if they wanted to, and they don't want to, so it's not going to happen. It reminds me of, I think it was JFK who said something about if you don't make peaceful revolution possible, you make violent revolution inevitable. And I think that's not preferable. I don't want to be involved in any kind of violent revolution. I don't want revolution at all. Because in essence, as they sit, these economies are basically sound. Now, obviously, there are some things that need to be changed, but they produce food, they produce valuable goods, they have housing, solid infrastructure in most cases. I'm talking about Europe now. The U.S., the infrastructure in the United States is pretty bad. But in Europe, these guys are doing all right. So that just leads me back to the idea that you have a political problem that is resting on a total lack of ability to change because they're afraid of losing power as they perceive it. And unfortunately, that fear of loss will probably only be magnified as the social struggles become more violent, and I think they will. Unfortunately, I think they will. And I think that the people who actually could make a deal in the European governmental structure, the European Union's governmental structure, I think they will be less likely to make deals as the people become more radicalized. And unfortunately, I don't know where, I think it might have been in the Guardian. I'll look. But at this point, French president, I think Macron, has said that all options are on the table to put this down, to put this violence down. And I wonder if escalating the violence is the worst idea possible. I wonder that. Because it has been a very long time since the French government has allowed indiscriminate violence to be used by either the police or their military to quote-unquote restore order. These people seem pretty upset, and I do wonder if maybe concessions would be the way to go as opposed to creating what would you say, an escalation in violence that leads to some kind of martyr, that leads to a rallying cry, that leads to another revolution in one of the most influential economies in Europe. And I think that if the political elite of Europe don't think that's on the table, I think they're lying to themselves. So that's change and fear for today. And I think in this situation, they're definitely joined at the hip. I hope that a peaceful solution can be found that results in lasting change and real change for the population of both France and Europe, because it will happen eventually. We live in a state of constant change. So any political system that is not aligned with the fundamental nature of reality will eventually be eclipsed by that reality which generates it. So, Nicholas Say, looking forward to talking with you, at you. However, more this week, and there could be another podcast or two in the works if you're into those. So, everybody have a great day. May cooler heads prevail, and also look for ways to avoid the fear of change in your personal life, because I'll tell you, it'll never help you. Have a great day, everybody. So it is Thursday, the 6th of December. Christmas is coming. For those of you who aren't afraid to talk about a holiday that is specific to a religion and also very old. I think it's very funny that over the last, well, really 10 years, but maybe 20, it's become, in many countries, in the West, pretty much only in the West, and only in very specific countries in the West, like, to get to the idea first. This is Nicholas Say. The Nicholas Say podcast, or just Nicholas Say podcast. I don't think "the" is necessary. And this is a monologue that will probably run for about 10 minutes, maybe more, probably not less. And the underlying idea is that in, well, let's call them very liberal, progressive countries, talking about anything religious or you could call it sort of this fear of marginalization has driven, is it Christmas time? No, it's the holiday season. Well, there's fucking holidays all year long. What the hell, man? It's Christmas time. It's the winter solstice. It's, it's supposed to be little baby Jesus and all that shit. You can't say that anymore. Well, unless you're in a Latin culture. And then it's, it's really Christmas. Feliz Navidad, hermanos. So what's the difference there? That's not the point. The point today is that I think I'm taking a massive shot at modern culture in the West. I'll start with the fucking snowflakes. There's a lot of stuff going around about how these people are basically unemployable. They're spoiled. They have no concept of reality. It's like life with bumpers. Like fucking bumper bowling. Like there's no way you can mess up. And there's no, what's the trigger? Oh, dude, don't trigger me. Well, of course I'm going to trigger you. Of course I am. Don't trigger you or what? I mean, you're going to get upset? We all get upset. Come on. Are you kidding? It's like you're going to live your life without getting upset. You're going to live your life without becoming, emotional to the point where you might have to control yourself. It's life in a bubble, man. It never lasts. To some degree, I grew up in sort of the snowflake proto-culture of fucking Ann Arbor, Michigan in the 80s. And I'll tell you, all this "you're a special little superstar" bullshit, it destroys people. It does. That's not how life works. Life is competitive. And you have to be that way. You have to distinguish yourself from other people. And you have to make sure that you're better than others if you want to have a life that isn't total shit. I mean, or you could go be a Buddhist monk or, some kind of Christian functionary, like basically a religious functionary. But even then, you're going to have to achieve some level of education. They don't just let you hang out and do nothing. That you have to do a bunch of stuff. And to do that, you need education and you need to have some sort of competitive drive, although the idea is not to be better than the other monks. The idea is just to achieve the level of monkness or whatever the hell. And for the Catholics, it'd be nice if they stopped raping kids, especially boys. I mean, I don't really delve too deep into that stuff because it makes my heart hurt that there's people who are betraying. I mean, you're talking about not betraying the trust of a family. You're talking about betraying the trust in the belief of God.
to the point where you're raping their fucking children, right? And it's not like one guy did it. You know, if one or two priests, or there was like one bad parish, you know, or whatever they call it in Catholicism, there was like one bad area, like, oh man, those priests in X city, I won't even use one. Like, those priests were really bastards. They were raping the shit out of the kids. Like, I'd let it go. I wouldn't even be talking about it because you know what? Bad people come together, they do bad shit. And I mean, that's why we think of them as bad people. Are they really? Well, you can be the judge of that. But, you know, they do horrendous shit to people. But it's like all over the fucking country. It's all over the world. They're raping mostly little boys for whatever reason. It's pretty weird that they, you know, they kind of just focus in on raping fucking male children. And then it's like, and then the church, the fucking, like, one of the most powerful ancient organizations on the planet, it's like, oh yeah, we're going to cover up those tracks. Yeah, we're going to move them around so they can keep on raping. Rape the little boys. That's Catholicism. Apparently that's what Jesus wanted. Fucking come on. Really? Is that really what Jesus died on the cross for? So that a bunch of creeps can rape little boys? Give me a fucking break. The whole thing seems very, very weird. And you know, I'm not saying that every Catholic preacher is a bad person. I knew a bunch of Catholics. Well, I know many Catholics, and they're good people. At least from what I knew about them, I know good Catholic preachers. But you have to wonder how that culture evolves, and you also I have to wonder how that. It's almost an archetype now. It's almost gotten to the level where these guys, these fucking sicko fucks, are raping little kids. It's being covered up. It's being more than covered up. It's being enabled. A cover up's like, okay, well, you know, we're gonna make this disappear, but you know, we're not gonna put you in a position to do it again. No, that's not what the fucking church is doing. And I'm not even Catholic. I mean, what do I have in it? I don't want to see kids get raped because that fucks up everything for everyone down the line. Because everybody knows if people get raped when they're kids, it fucks them up. Everybody knows that. And if they don't, they fucking should. So I think if you should, you know, it's like the Starbucks thing where it's like, let's talk about race.
Okay,
Or
so
whatever. Let's start a discussion about
it
race.
gets a little bit
Let's
intense.
start a fucking discussion about.
Again, and it became repetitive. I said some things that that are being papered over by this little clip right here. So I did include some links as to why the Catholic Church should probably not be trusted on an overall basis. But that doesn't mean there aren't good people in the church, and many of the people I've met that do I don't want to say claim that practice the Catholic
But what
faith
you can
are
do
good, decent people,
is eliminate
and I mean that.
organizations
So don't take this
that
as
enable
too
that behavior.
one-sided. Although
And
I know
so
that
I
if you
think this
listen
is
to it all the
straight
way
up to the
through,
Vatican. Like,
it sounds pretty
you stop
one-sided.
enabling preachers to rape fucking children, or somehow the organization is dissolved. I think that's I think that's pretty fair. Because if any other organization, like, let's say you had like the Shriners or something, or you know, this is a good example. Like, look at all the pressure that's on NAMBLA. That fucking, like, they actually they advocate for pedophilia, but they can never really practice it. Now, the Catholic Church doesn't advocate for pedophilia, but they practice it like a motherfucker. And the next thing you know, it's okay. You know, where's the charges? Where's, you know, starting up an organization for this specific purpose? And I'm not saying that they, you know, it's an overt purpose, but at a certain point, you have to say that when you have thousands and thousands and thousands of incidences of a severe, you know, a grievous felony, you have to say, look, okay, obviously you say you're in the religion business, but you take a lot of money off the public, you get tax breaks, and you rape little fucking kids. Okay, so, you know, it's time, you know, in the United States, you have the RICO Acts. Hit them like fucking organized criminals because they're playing this God angle. They got funny clothes, they're raping kids, and yeah, that's pretty weird. And I think that at this point, I've said raping kids a lot, and I think that should stop. And I don't know where this started, but I'm at 10 minutes, so I think um, that it is important that people who have achieved some level of distinction in this world, because there's a lot of motherfuckers out there digging ditches. There's a lot of people in the United States say driving long haul trucks, and it's no fucking secret they're nobodies. They're nobodies. Nobody ever is gonna fucking know your name, other than your fucking tombstone and your birth certificate and whatever family you have. Nobody cares about you. You're never gonna be famous. You're never gonna be anything. And that's okay. Because I'll tell you, 99% of the world is that way. 99.9%. You think money makes a difference? Fuck no. I'll bet you could go to those fucking poor sumbitch ditch diggers with the Forbes list, the Forbes 400 richest people in the world, all billionaires, and one side wouldn't know the fucking other. They wouldn't. I mean, other than maybe a few famous names, say if you're in the United States, they probably know who Bill Gates is. Some of those guys are pretty smart. You know, they spend their time reading, and, you know, it's just a matter of fate that they didn't get higher in the world. And I don't judge that. I mean, it is what it is. But people who have a voice have a responsibility, and people who have power have a responsibility to ensure social cohesion in a very real sense. And that's something that we all need to do. Anybody who can do something, do it. Today it was me fucking screaming about don't rape little kids and shut down the fucking organization, or make them reform to the point where they no longer have the ability to ensure the ongoing commission of grievous felonies. Give me a fucking break. Nicholas Say podcast. I'll be coming back tomorrow, no doubt. I got a couple other podcasts in the work too. It's coming. Love you all. If you're out there and you can do something to make the world a better place, better by your own morals. You know, as long as you're not hurting people, as long as you have compassion, as long as you got a heart and you're not just all mind, all money, all power, you're probably going in the right direction. Hello, 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 hello. How you doing? Nicholas Say, and this will be the last Nicholas Say monologue of the week. Yay! I just looked. I actually had 20 people listen to the first monologue I did. And if you like it, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate people listening to me. I hope, excuse me. I hope you get something out of it. No, I got a little carried away banging on the Catholic Church in the last podcast. And I want to say that they have also done a lot of good in the world. There have been good people involved with that organization. So I don't want to be too one-sided. All right, today, for the last podcast of the week, don't worry, there'll be another one Monday, or monologue of the week. We are going to do something on fear and worry. And I'm going to take it from a more practical perspective today. I know a lot of people who are independent, creatives, or have small businesses. Most of the people I know actually have some kind of small business, and I think it's very funny in a way that people worry so much about life in general. But I know that it tends to come out more when a person has their own business, because when you work for a bigger company, I think psychologically we can lay off some of the worry on the fact that, well, you work for a big company and there'll be more stability there, and there's sort of like a paternal thing, you know. It's why I think one of the big reasons why people got in the United States got shafted on pensions throughout the 80s and 90s. I don't know, probably to this day it's still going on, but they trusted the company, you know, and the company said you're going to have a pension, and, you know, next thing you know, the company's bankrupt, and, you know, some poor machine
operator, they don't understand pension law, and they're like, "What do you mean I don't have any money and I'm poor and I'm broke?" And it's like, well, you shouldn't trust the company. I actually got in quite an argument with my ex-mother-in-law about that, and she kept saying, "Well, the company was supposed to give them the, because my ex-wife was from a real, what do they call that, blue collar, really kind of low rent, socioeconomic environment, and a lot of people from those communities got screwed." During the 80s and 90s, when they came through and reorganized these companies and said, well, we don't have to pay you these pensions, so we're not going to, because that's a corporate mentality, and you have to know that when you deal with corporations, you have to know that's how they think. But many people from these kind of rural, kind of lower rung areas, they have this inexplicable faith in corporations, and it ended up creating a lot of suffering. So I think that's in play when people decide to go independent, and instead of being able to say, well, I work for a company, and obviously they have a location, and I can trust them to some degree, and they're going to pay me, and all of that, all of a sudden, well, you're running the whole show. And so now worry starts to creep in. Well, God, I've got to eat. I've got, it gets even more serious when you have a family or kids or something. You're like, well, God, I've got to help contribute. Or if you're the only one who makes a living in the family, you're the one who's making sure that there's a roof over your children's head, and there's food on the table. Or in the case of one of my friends, the maids are paid. How's that for rich people problems? Gotta make sure the maids get paid. Which, of course, is true. You do. Of course you do. Of course you do. Or you have to make up a new plan that meets your needs, not your wants, but your needs. That meets your needs with what you can earn. Of course you do. Of course you do. But here's the thing. And if anybody listens to this and they know somebody who gets paid to worry, I'd like to know more about them. I've never met anyone who gets paid to worry. Like, I've never heard, I've never met a person in a social function in a bar. What do you do? Oh, I worry. Like, well, no, we all worry, but no, for a living, I worry. Oh, okay. Someone pays you by the hour to worry about stuff? No, I've never had that happen in my life. And in your personal life, it's even more pointless, I think. Because worrying about what could happen, at its root, and I'm not the first person to talk about this, I think I'm probably able to articulate it as well as I am because of the Buddhist teachers that I've listened to and read. It's a negative view of the future, right? When you worry, you are being negative in the present, but you're fooling yourself to think that you're doing something productive when all you're doing is being negative. And that's a choice, because you could just as easily be optimistic about the future, or you could be realistic and say, well, if I keep living, some things that I see as positive and some things that I see as negative will happen. That is what will happen. That is life. Now, in an absolute sense, things will happen. Change will happen. Things will happen. Events, in the way we perceive events, will occur. It will occur. Things will happen. Events will occur, and one day you die. I mean, that's sort of stripping life bare, but it goes to illustrate that worry is a singular concept. It's very negative, and it's future based, and then the opposite would be regret, right? Because that's taking a negative view of the past, as opposed to thinking about the good things that happen. Because believe me, I've been in some bullshit in my life, but you know what? It was never, ever 100% bad. Never, not once. I can always go into even I had a bad childhood. I can even go into my childhood. You know what? I can find so many good things about it. But if your focus is the same thing as worry in the future, if you're regretful about the past, you're not thinking about any of the positive things. You're just sitting around, and ultimately, you know what you're doing? You're sitting there in the present being negative. And fear enables that. Fear is I do not remember where I heard it, but fear is a thief, and that's not an original. That's I've heard that said, and it's true. Fear is a thief. Fear will rob you in your present of anything that's good, anything that's positive about your life. Because remember, there's always going to be something positive. Always. There's always going to be something good happening in the present moment. And you can choose to find that and focus on that, not to the point where you're excluding other things, that need to be dealt with, but, or you could find negative things to focus on, because I'll tell you what, no matter how good your life is, and I've seen this many times with affluent people, no matter how good your life is, there's always a reason, always, to feel bad and focus on a negative thing. I work for a guy who was fairly affluent. At least he lived an affluent lifestyle. He was one of these U.S. guys who had tons of debt, and I guess he was making it work. But he made it out of his day. He had a very functional, very successful, say, business. But he would sit around and worry about upgrading his McMansion. He lived in one of these McMansion communities in the suburbs, whatever. It was very common at the time. And he would sit there, and we'd have lots of work to do, and his assistants, of one of I was one of them. We did most of the work, and that's true in many industries. But in this business especially, the assistants did 90% of the work, and he would actually kind of hunt for full time assistants that he could put on the payroll and then just lean on pretty hard to get most of the work. Anyway, so he would sit around in his office, and he was between first assistants or primary assistants or whatever. These staff guys that he would bring in. I never once saw him have a good experience with one of these guys, in the long run. And he was sitting around. He's like talking to me. He's like, Nick, what do you think? You think looking at getting my pool redone? And I've got so many choices. And I mean, the guy literally sat there for 3 days. I mean, okay, to be fair, he did leave his office once in a while to eat and look at what was going on in and around the property and make a couple tweaks here and there to what we were doing. But yeah, he was in that office. He was genuinely focused and concerned that he might pick the wrong pool lining for his in-ground pool at his McMansion. Now that's retarded. It really is. And this was going into the 2008 financial crisis when I'm pretty sure everybody got their ass handed to them. I was leaving the States by then. But that's the idea of fear and worry. And it can dominate your life. It can dominate your psychic reality. And to a certain extent, you have to realize that you're going to have negative thoughts. You have to, because you'll have negative views on things, and that's a necessary part of life, because to discern, to make decisions, to discern between choices you want to make and choices you don't want to make, you have to see one of the views as foolish or negative or not something that you want to be involved in, and that's fine. But to hold yourself in that state, well, I just don't see how you can make any money with it. I don't see the end game on that. So I think negative action is going to lead you to negative attitude is going to lead to negative action, which is going to lead ultimately to negative results. And generally, people who are good at making money, having successful businesses, they're good at getting things done in a positive sense. Think about it like you're in a little group. And say few people, 2 or 3 of the people are like, no, none of this is going to work. You guys don't know what you're talking about, this and that. Well, those guys aren't going to ever get anything done. And if you have positive people who are going to say, okay, you know what? I don't know if this is going to work or not, because we've never done it before, but we're going to try, and we're going to learn. And maybe it'll work on the first go, and maybe it'll work on the second. But I'll tell you what, if we do fail, and you can use that word, it's not a dirty word. If we do fail, we can learn from that failure. And the next time we try, because we're going to keep trying, eventually they're going to get it. Eventually the situation will be resolved. Positive action taken will lead
to positive results eventually. And hey, you might nail it on your first try. That happens. It's happened to me. Happens to me all the time. So, there you go. There's a very simple theoretical example between, negative action leads to negative results, and you basically keep doing that, you're going to have a very, very unfulfilling life. And nobody who's got any talent whatsoever is going to want to work with you because you're never going to get anything done. And positive results come from positive action, positive thought. In the sense that it is possible, it can be done. We can do it. We can give our best and learn from our mistakes, right? It's very simple, but it seems like it's something that's lost, and it's lost on many people. And I write about, I think it's either in these descriptions or you can go to my Patreon page, a site called Moneymakers, and a lot I write about these the millionaire or billionaire mindset or the habits of these people, and they won't even deal with negative people. A lot of these self-made millionaires and billionaires, if you're negative, they don't want anything to do with you, and why would they? Because you're not going to get anything done, and all you're going to do is, it's like a cancer in a group of positive, successful people. Is some negative asshole sitting around going, "No, this isn't going to work. What do you think you're doing? Give me a break." Obviously, look around you. Things get done. Buildings get built. Machines are made. Ideas are refined. It can be done. So, there you go. Ending the week on a positive note. Producing something for free for everyone to listen to and hopefully get something out of it. It's a Nicholas Say monologue, Nicholas Say podcast, Nicholas Say YouTube channel. There's your SEO. I hope everybody had a great week. Hugs and love and beautiful energy. And if you're a Catholic priest, make the right decision and don't rape the little kid.